Madam Secretary, next agenda item, please.
The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the placement of Kendrick Laronte Weatherspoon to the list of excluded persons, case 21-05.
Okay, so before we hear any presentation, I was hoping to ask a few procedural questions so that I have the context of hearing any understanding, kind of, since I'm the new chair and I'm not privy to previous placement on the list process. If you don't mind, can I ask just a couple questions to start?
Absolutely.
All right. By the way, go ahead and state your appearance.
Mike Somps with the Attorney General's office.
Okay, so just so that I understand, how do potential persons get brought to the attention of the board, the commission?
So generally, it comes up through the enforcement division. In my presentation, I will speak to that with this particular individual, but enforcement does do an investigation, and from there, it rises up to the board deciding whether or not to nominate the individual.
And do you have a working knowledge of the list itself as far as the genesis of those people coming from enforcement or elsewhere? Well, is that something you could speak to today or no?
Well, with the chief's help, I can.
Okay.
Chair, may I ask a quick
Oh, no,
question?
one more.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
I'm not done. Sorry. I don't get to talk much because I'm always at the end. So I'm going to ask, as far as the confidential section of this, kind of enlighten me, if you would, on how that request is being made. I've had other circumstances where the Office of the Attorney General has told me that anything that's presented to the commission is subject to being questioned and commented on and referred to by statute. And so I'm very sensitive, in light of my previous professional background, to the NCIC limitations of public dissemination of certain information. I get all that, but there's a lot more in here in this confidential section than, some of them are. So as far as your request to keep it confidential, anything in the exhibits, before we start our hearing and we're referencing someone's history or something, I guess I need to know and understand, how far is it that you're asking us to go in confidentiality, meaning don't post it on any public, website, meaning don't talk about its content. Enlighten me on what you're asking for when you designate something exhibit 16 with exhibits A through M that includes a lot of things. Confidential.
Yeah, I would ask that the entirety of that exhibit, which is the affidavit of the board enforcement agent, along with all of the attachments, which contain a lot of personal information regarding victims, social security numbers, addresses, names, things of that nature. So because of that, I just asked that the whole affidavit and its attachments be kept confidential.
But you're not suggesting that as you go through your presentation or we ask questions, that is obviously, I think we're all pretty sophisticated enough to be sensitive to personal identifying information by law, actually, victims' names, that kind of thing. But actual facts underlying arrests, convictions versus arrested charges, that kind of thing that are replete throughout here, you're not suggesting that remain confidential?
No, and in fact, I will be, in my presentation, going over some of the allegations that were made or contained in the police reports that are part of of that particular exhibit.
Okay, so as far as what you are asking us to not comment on publicly would be personal identifying information, names of victims, any NCIC arrest records. I don't know. As tangentially referenced.
Right. And there isn't actually an
right.
NCIC record in there.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I set the parameters from my mind for what we get to, be asked to keep confidential versus not.
Sure.
Okay, so he has a presentation. Do you have something beforehand?
Just a quick question, if you could include in your presentation the composition historically of this nomination for exclusion. What is it composed as? Is it usually people who cheat in gaming, or is it somebody with this type of a record? Because it's not really cheating based. It's, I think, violence and felony and
Sure.
drug charges based. So I just want to see how it compares historically with the composition of the existing list to which the chair referenced. You
Yeah,
can include that.
I will address that. And of course, obviously, if you have any questions beyond that.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, my name is Mike Somps. I'm with the Attorney General's office, and I'm here on behalf of the Gaming Control Board. And I'm here regarding the matter of the exclusion of Kendrick Laronte Weatherspoon from licensed gaming establishments. This is not a contested hearing today because the hearing was not requested by Mr. Weatherspoon. And I don't believe he's in the audience, so you can confirm if you want, but if he was, you would be able to hear from him at your discretion, but I don't believe he's here today. Nonetheless, the commission must still consider the board's nomination and decide whether to place Mr. Weatherspoon on the list of excluded persons. So with your permission, I'm prepared to make a presentation. I'll create a record that supports placing Mr. Weatherspoon on the list of excluded persons. So first, as we've alluded to, there is a packet of exhibits that have been prepared, and hopefully each of you have copies that have been provided to Madam Secretary. I will be going through these exhibits, and at this time, if you'd like, Madam Chair, we can do it at the end. I'd ask that they be admitted and made a part of the record, and as we discuss, that Exhibit 16 be made a confidential exhibit.
So procedurally, when we admit an exhibit, it becomes a, public record. Exhibits 1 through 15. And then Exhibit 16 is deemed a confidential document and admitted. Okay.
And just one other comment on Exhibit 16. It is the enforcement agent's affidavit, and that details much of Mr. Weatherspoon's criminal history. And it also links Mr. Weatherspoon up as the same individual for all the convictions and arrests that I'm going to be discussing today. So with those exhibits admitted, my plan is to first provide some background information for the commission's benefit. And then second, I'll review the grounds for including Mr. Weatherspoon on the list. And then finally, I'll have some concluding remarks. There are some individuals here that I'll introduce you to, and they'll be available to you to the extent you want to hear from them. And then, of course, answer any questions that you might have. So first, some background. The matter before you today requires the commission to make a determination of whether the presence of Mr. Weatherspoon in a Nevada gaming establishment would pose a threat to the interest of Nevada or to licensed gaming. Back on January 5th of this year, the Gaming Control Board entered an order of nomination finding the presence of Mr. Weatherspoon in a licensed gaming establishment does in fact pose a threat to the interest of Nevada and to licensed gaming, and that he should therefore be excluded from licensed gaming establishments. If you look at Exhibit 1 in your packet, that is a copy of that order. Now, after the board nominated Mr. Weatherspoon, he was then served on February 8th of this year with the board's order of nomination and a notice of candidacy. That notice is Exhibit 2 in your packet. Service was accomplished by way of Mr. Weatherspoon's criminal defense attorney, who agreed to accept service on his client's behalf. That is Exhibit 3 in your packet. He was also served by certified mail with these documents on February 16th, and that is Exhibit 4. Mr. Weatherspoon had 30 days from service to request a hearing before the commission. We're obviously well beyond that period of time, and as I indicated, no hearing was requested. Separate and apart from the service requirements under the Gaming Control Act, the open meeting law does require notice to Mr. Weatherspoon that this matter was going to be on this commission's agenda today. So in compliance with the open meeting law, Mr. Weatherspoon was provided written notice, and I will provide Madam Secretary with evidence of that at the end of today's meeting on this. So then moving on to the grounds for including Mr. Weatherspoon. These are summarized in a bill of particulars that is in your exhibit packet at Exhibit 5. So pursuant to statute, the list may include any person whose presence in a gaming establishment is determined to pose a threat to the interest of Nevada or licensed gaming or both. In making that determination, you may consider the criteria set forth in NRS 463.151 sub 3. Pursuant to regulation 28.010, if you determine that any one of those criteria are met in that statute, you can include Mr. Weatherspoon on the list. For Mr. Weatherspoon, he satisfies two of the criteria for inclusion. One, he has been convicted of crimes which are felonies in Nevada. And secondly, he has a notorious or unsavory reputation that would adversely affect public confidence and trust that the gaming industry is free from criminal or corruptive elements. So first, I'm going to go through his felony convictions, starting with those convictions furthest in his past. So if you look at Exhibit 6, that's evidence that Mr. Weatherspoon was convicted in Nevada on December 5th, 1996, of possession of a controlled substance with intent to sell. That's a felony. Next, at Exhibit 7, that evidences that on September 19th, 2001, he was convicted in Nevada of, possession of controlled substance, cocaine, which is a felony. Looking at Exhibit 8, it evidences that on December 2nd, 2002, Mr. Weatherspoon was convicted in Nevada of possession of a controlled substance with intent to sell and ex-felon in possession of a firearm, both felonies. And then Exhibit 9, that shows that more recently, on August 4th of last year, Mr. Weatherspoon pled guilty in Nevada to 2 counts of coercion, and that led to his most recent convictions on February 17th of this year, when a judgment of conviction was entered, convicting him of 2 counts of coercion. You can find that at Exhibit 10. You can also see in that judgment of conviction that Mr. Weatherspoon was placed in probation, and one of the terms of that probation is that he cannot go to the strip corridor. I think it's also important to note for these latest convictions that court records show that Mr. Weatherspoon was at one point facing charges of burglary, kidnapping, sex trafficking, battery by strangulation, and sexual assault. That's contained at Exhibit 11. Now, for this conviction, I'd also like to highlight some of the details that led to the charges and ultimately the conviction. Allegations were made by the victim against Mr. Weatherspoon by a female who said she had first met with Mr. Weatherspoon at a Las Vegas casino. She alleged that they communicated for a few months, and then he eventually convinced her to be a prostitute for him. From there, they both went to another Las Vegas casino on the Strip, and he instructed her to engage in prostitution there. However, while there, she changed her mind. She decided she didn't want to do that. Mr. Weatherspoon, unfortunately for her, had been following her, and when she returned home, she alleged that Mr. Weatherspoon was there, and he proceeded to grab her by the throat, he shoved her against the wall, and he lifted her into the air, so much so that she couldn't breathe. She alleged that he also punched her a number of times in the head, where she eventually blacked out. When she came to, he sexually assaulted her. This information is evidenced in Agent Garcia's affidavit, as well as Attachment A to that affidavit. So the criteria in NRS 463.151 subsection 3A that he be convicted of felonies in Nevada is satisfied. Now, going on to the second criteria, Mr. Weatherspoon's notorious or unsavory reputation, which would adversely affect public confidence and trust that the gaming industry is free from criminal elements or corruptive elements. So, of course, all of those described convictions are evidence of Mr. Weatherspoon's notorious or unsavory reputation. But that's not all. Additional evidence of his unsavory reputation is his extensive criminal history that's described by Agent Garcia in his affidavit, and that in addition to the convictions I've already described, includes allegations regarding his activities at Nevada licensed gaming establishments that suggest his involvement in sex trafficking, and that includes arrests and convictions for instances of violence against women. Now, to offer some additional detail of his reputation, I'd like to go through some specific examples of Mr. Weatherspoon's misdemeanor convictions. They're worth highlighting, and that show his propensity for violence and provide additional support for Mr. Weatherspoon's criminal activity in and around gaming establishments. So in July of 2019, Mr. Weatherspoon was convicted of misdemeanor domestic battery. Evidence of that is Exhibit 12. Additional details are provided through Agent Garcia's affidavit and Attachment B to that affidavit. The victim of this particular crime alleged that she was a prostitute for Mr. Weatherspoon and that he had punched her in the lips. Just a few months prior, in May of 2019, Mr. Weatherspoon had another conviction for misdemeanor domestic battery. That's at Exhibit 13. Exhibit 14 is a certified copy of the amended criminal complaint for this case. It also shows that Mr. Weatherspoon was initially facing charges of sex trafficking and accepting earnings of a prostitute. The details behind this conviction can be found again at Agent Garcia's affidavit and Attachment C. The victim for this particular crime is the same as the one for Mr. Weatherspoon's July 2019 conviction, and she again alleged that she was a prostitute for Mr. Weatherspoon. She alleged that she and Mr. Weatherspoon were in an argument over the amount of money she made for him that night. She also alleged that he threatened to take her kids away if she didn't make more money, that he punched her in her nose, kicked her in her abdomen, and had thrown her to the ground. With this conviction, it's also important to note Mr. Weatherspoon's tie-in to gaming, as the police report reflects that prior to the battery, the victim and Mr. Weatherspoon had been arguing in an Uber driving them from a Las Vegas Strip casino. Finally, in November 2009, Mr. Weatherspoon had another conviction for misdemeanor battery domestic violence. That's Exhibit 15. Again, the details are contained in Agent Garcia's affidavit and Attachment 9. Now, beyond these convictions, there's also examples of arrests of Mr. Weatherspoon showing his nexus to gaming and that add to the picture of his unsavory reputation. In 2016, Mr. Weatherspoon was arrested when the victim alleged that he followed her into a Las Vegas Strip casino and into the women's restroom while yelling at her and attempting to drag her out. The victim alleged that when she ran out of the casino and onto Las Vegas Boulevard, Mr. Weatherspoon caught her and placed her in a headlock. Again, details in the agent's affidavit and Attachment F. In July 2013, Mr. Weatherspoon was arrested for grand larceny based on an allegation that while at a Las Vegas casino, he stole $1,000 in chips belonging to another blackjack player. That's Attachment G to the agent's affidavit. In June 2013, Mr. Weatherspoon was arrested when the victim alleged that while she and Mr. Weatherspoon were at a Las Vegas casino, he wanted to leave, but she didn't. So he picked her up and carried her to the car where she claimed he proceeded to punch her in the face. Details in the agent's affidavit and Attachment H. Now, Mr. Weatherspoon has also been trespassed from a number of Las Vegas gaming establishments in recent years. This is described by Agent Garcia in his affidavit. In addition, on one occasion, Mr. Weatherspoon was arrested in 2017 for trespassing at a Las Vegas casino following a police investigation of a grand larceny trick roll, where the suspected prostitute was detained while attempting to get in a vehicle driven by Mr. Weatherspoon. The suspected prostitute is the same person as the victim of Mr. Weatherspoon, where he was convicted in May and July of 2019 of domestic battery. Again, I'd refer you to the agent's affidavit for more details. And I finally want to note that Mr. Weatherspoon continues to pose a threat to the interest of Nevada and licensed gaming, as his last known address continues to be here in Las Vegas. So with the proceeding, NRS 463.151 subsection 3C is satisfied and forms that second basis for including him on the list. And again, establishing any one of those criteria is sufficient for placing him in the list. And Mr. Weatherspoon again satisfies too. So that covers the legal grounds for including Mr. Weatherspoon on the list. Statutory provisions are met that allow you to add him to the list if you choose to do so. So the question becomes, is that what you should do? And I recognize, and the board recognized when it considered this matter, that placing Mr. Weatherspoon with his type of background is unique. But I want to say that including someone on the list with this unique background as compared to others on the list is not unusual. The list has always evolved. The types of individuals placed on the list over the years has changed depending on the problems of the time, whether it's in connection, those that have connections to organized crime, those that are slot cheats or cheating at other gaming activities, or those that are using the gaming establishments as a place to steal from patrons. The list has been used for all those different purposes, depending on the issue of the day. And I think the legislature wisely created a structure that recognizes and allows for that evolution. Today, others can speak to this much better than I, but today prostitution and sex trafficking are increasingly problematic in Las Vegas casinos. And I can tell you that because of that, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has sought help from the board addressing the problem through placing someone on the list with that type of background. The enforcement division of the board was open to that idea and decided to test the appetite of the board and obviously now the commission to use the list of excluded person provisions for that type of individual. Metro ultimately proposed Mr. Weatherspoon, who, as I understand it, is one of the worst given his significant criminal history. He's an individual with plenty of arrests, charges, and convictions related to drugs, related to violence against women, related to sex trafficking, and he often makes use of casinos here in Las Vegas and had these very recent charges that included sex trafficking, making use of Las Vegas casinos. So ultimately, in making your decision, I think you have to take the picture that's provided to you of Mr. Weatherspoon through the documents you have and decide if this is the type of individual you want in Nevada's casinos. Does his presence pose a threat to the interests of Nevada and the industry? The board has answered yes. Obviously, if you answer yes, he will be placed on the list. And I think that a message will be conveyed that those who engage in sex trafficking and violence against women are not going to be allowed to engage in that activity in Nevada's casinos. And I also want to tell you that if you answer yes, I think that you may be seeing other individuals with this type of background before you for consideration to be added to the list. Now that concludes my presentation. As I indicated earlier, there are representatives here. We have Todd Fasulo, the Vice President of Security for Wynn Resorts, and Captain Haas, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, who, if you want to hear from them, can speak to the problem of sex trafficking currently occurring in Las Vegas and on the Strip, and can probably speak to whether or not it's helpful to have someone like this on the list of excluded persons. I also have Chief Taylor from the Enforcement Division, who's here to help me answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, that concludes my presentation. And again, I'd ask that this particular individual be placed on the list of excluded persons.
So if I could, I had 3 questions at the start of this. 2 of them, I'm not sure. I would like a little more specific answer.
Okay.
I guess I'm asking where the genesis of this person being brought to the attention of our agency came from, not like Metro, but a specific person, a division. I'm not thinking it's administration of the sheriff. So I'm just curious where it came from, a person.
And I apologize. I don't have the name of the individual.
I've been actually
I'll defer to
asking that for
Chief Taylor.
How long have I been asking that, you think? I've asked that through channels and I've never really had an answer. So I thought today I would be able to get that answer. Is there a person or a, form you fill out? How'd that happen?
If I may.
Sure.
James Taylor, Chief of Enforcement. Good afternoon or morning, Commissioners and Chairwoman Pataglia. This name came to us directly from the Convention Center Area Command, Captain Pelletier at the time. But these conversations have been had with Metro for at least a dozen years. I took over the Black Book back in 1996. I can think of several instances over the years that vice captains, vice lieutenants, Karen Hughes was one of the early ones that asked me if we would be interested in this, but it was Captain Pelletier that was the last one that asked us several years ago. I told him at the time that it would fit the criteria, but he would need to present us with who they thought was the worst, who would help them the most. I asked him to pick somebody that had instances in the casinos that we could show was truly a threat, and that once they identified somebody and put the package together, that I would pull the board and see if they would consider that. So this goes back to 2018 for this particular individual. We had our case is that old anyway, but of course with COVID and the more recent arrest of this individual, and he was in custody for a while, it wasn't until January that the board actually heard this case.
So 2018, the Convention Area Command, did you say Lieutenant? I'm sorry.
It was Captain Pelletier at the
Captain.
time. Mhm.
Thank you.
But there were others in that discussion. It wasn't just him. It was Vice and others, but he was the one that
When this person specifically was requested and presented to you, was by him at what time?
It was around 2018. I think he had one of his intelligence who worked with other areas of Metro, obviously, but I think one of his intelligence analysts put the package together.
And the other question I had that I didn't quite get an answer to, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If you don't know, just say so. But I guess, as you probably know, how many of the persons on the list come from a genesis, a suggestion outside of our own investigators and people versus not?
Well, I can speak to my tenure. Of course, the list has only had 71 people on it in the history. So 11 of them were put in on the first day. That was in 1960. So there's only been 60 put in since that day. And I can speak to my time in 1996 when I was tasked with kind of, I don't want to use the word freshen up the black book, but nobody had been put in the list of excluded persons for several years when I was tasked with it. I did about 25 cases over a 7-year period, and 20 of those were nominated. Probably 7 of those came from Metro Intelligence or our other law enforcement partners. More recently, Joseph Moody was brought to us actually by the industry. Some consortium of security professionals brought his name to my attention. Of course, we had a number of cases on him as well, and so does Metro. That was in 2018 that he was nominated and put into the list of excluded persons. So this is not unique in that way that allied law enforcement has come to us with names.
And so, because I'm not privy to the lengthy history that you have, and I would just kind of like the background. So for the persons on the list that you listed, how many of them are non-gaming related offenders, like, jump over the cashier cage with a gun and rob the cage type people, or some crime other than cheating, or something that we would have seen in the more recent.
Okay, so up to 1996, when I took over the list, it at that point it was all comprised of organized crime figures and cheats, basically. Mostly Italian organized crime. We did have 2 Hawaiian gang members that were kind of legacy members of the book. Since that time, we have nominated other organized crime figures. I think the last one of those was in about 2004, I think, was the last organized crime figure. So since then, it's been organized crime figures, casino cheats, bookmakers, and just thieves. Now, this is kind of a unique situation to have somebody with this kind of criminal background, but he's not unlike a lot of the organized crime figures that we did who had no criminal history in the casinos. They might have used the casinos to conduct business, but there were quite a few from other cities that would just come here, and they were nominated and placed in the list of excluded persons that had no gaming connection other than they were frequent guests of the casinos.
Well, slight differences in that, and I don't know if you're familiar with my background at all, but prior to this appointment, I was a district court judge for many years. As I know Mr. Fasulo he was chief of the jail when I was chief judge of the 8th Judicial District. I was a JP, I was a DA, and I ended my career as a prosecutor on the Special Victims Unit. So I'm very, very familiar with the sex trafficking in Las Vegas and in our state, actually, and the problems associated with that. I guess the question that I really am curious about, and because this is obviously a bad actor, for sure. I don't think anybody's going to sit here and say, that we're surprised that you're here. I'm certainly not. I guess my question is, so there were 400 cases in 3 years in sex trafficking filed by the district attorney in Clark County, 400. And we're talking minors being brought to hotels, all kinds of things. And from what I was a little surprised to hear that he got on the radar before even this most recent case, the genesis of this case, because the offense date was in 2021. So at that time, he had, to use a prosecution phrase, no cases that really stuck related to sex offending, as far as sex trafficking, pandering, living off the earnings, the kinds of things that you would see in a case or an offender like this. And so I'm just curious, what would be policy-wise, what is your vision in your position for the other 399 offenders that were filed between, because I'm going to guess that you don't have enough staff to possibly go through all those, the ones that are sex trafficking minors and bringing them to hotels, things like that, where, the girls are 14, 16, 17. Do we have the kind of staff to this is a very thorough, helpful investigation. We obviously don't take it lightly. And so I guess the question I have is, what's your vision of what policy considerations are this person versus that person? Minors are involved, recanting adults are involved, because obviously there's something happened here where the district attorney could not get a sex offense conviction on this particular. It's a non-sex coercion, which is you have the right to do or abstain from doing something, and you are forced to do something you have the right not to do. So that's not a sex offense. And so I guess the question is, what is the vision for the policy on who out of those 400 approximately cases filed from 2019 till I think it was end of 21, beginning of 19, that we would be looking at going forward? Because obviously how you handle one thing is how you handle everything. We have precedent setting concerns. And when I was a judge, at least, I always wanted to treat similarly situated people the same. So what is your vision or policy vision on that?
Okay, so the boards before this constitution of the board have always wanted the list to be manageable, to be small, not like other states with hundreds of people on the list. I haven't had that discussion with this particular board, but they've always wanted the list to be kind of the worst of the worst. The ones that we can manage a list of 35 to 40, and that's all we've ever kept it, because as people are deceased, we take them off the list. And so that's why I went to Metro when they asked for this particular type of crime to be included, because they were having lots of problems with pimps that would hang out at casinos, and they would keep an eye on their women, but keep an eye on, others that were working for others, and it would create violence, like you, I'm sure, are aware. But also they would prey on tourists, and we, try to solicit them to come and work. And so that was the genesis of this type of individual to place on the list. Why him in particular? I'd have to turn to Metro on why him in particular, because I told them that we would consider something like this as we've done in the past, but we don't know this world. The Gaming Control Board, hears about it. And in every meeting I'm at, we hear about, the problems with human trafficking. There's even an article in the paper today with the U.S. Attorney, saying that this is a new focus for their office. So it is a problem on the Strip. It is something that we can address through this. But why this particular individual? I'd have to ask.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing that. I'm not opining on it. I'm asking what going forward, a vision going forward. There's 400 of these filed, right? And many of them might not get a no-op probation, right? So that tells me something, that as far as the district attorney here is not one to turn a blind eye to sex trafficking offenses, nor is our police. Know that for a fact. And I'm always very happy to see it, and think it's an important part of law enforcement to have specific detail, like Vice, be policing this and making sure, no one should be subjected to observing some of the things I read in these exhibits happening in the casino, or being solicited when they're minding their own business, or any of those things. I'm saying going forward, if there's 400 cases, and some of them are going to be worse than him, no doubt about it, and some will be not as bad, maybe their first foray into sex trafficking, but I just am asking policy wise, that's the hard consideration is
you set the policy, so it's I guess after the discussion today we'll know where we're going.
You bring it to the board,
But,
and you bring it to, then they bring it to us. So
but of the 400, we would look at whether we would even do another one, I don't know, but of the 400, we would look at probably the worst of that bunch. And do they have a problem in the casinos themselves? Are there lots of instances like there was with this individual inside casinos? And are they a threat to either public safety or public perception? But the NRS is clear that it's an interest of the state, not just gaming, but the interest of the state.
Well, I'm not precluding anyone from, I guess I'll just wait and see what my colleagues have to say. I guess my guess is that Metro would tell us that a majority of the prostitution activity that's going on will happen near or around a casino or gaming area. I'm certainly aware of that, and personally from professional experiences and I guess common sense. I'm just saying that from my perspective, I do have concern about the 399 other cases that are going on where you have these folks that, and I think Metro would also concede these cases are very difficult. They're very difficult to get convictions and prison time because of the nature of the cycle of violence and the recanting and they're very difficult cases. So I'm not criticizing anyone from coming here. I just am suggesting that I'm curious as to going forward, how this would affect the business of the board and the business of the commission on this list. But that being said, I'm not going to monopolize your time, and I'm going to open it up for questions or comments, starting. Who would like to start? Okay.
Chief Taylor, if I don't want to put you on the spot, but the last person that was admitted to the Black Book was, I believe, in 2019.
18.
Was it 19?
18. There was 4 of the last 5 were part of the Bellagio craps scam, the $1 million.
We voted on one shortly after I joined the commission in 19. And I thought it was a similar one where they were kind of using the casinos as their personal playground.
Yeah, sometimes they do take a while to actually
for it to go
your
through.
desk.
So I was just hoping you'd remember, because I remember it being similar circumstances to this. I would like to hear from the industry representative that's here and from Metro. My concern, like Judge or Chair Tagliotti, is that if it gets too large, if it's helpful, then definitely, from a policy standpoint, it's something we should consider. From a practical standpoint, if it becomes too large and unmanageable, then it loses its purpose. Having been in the industry, the 71 people that were on there, and there's probably less than that back then, but when I was in the industry in the 90s, we had every internal auditor memorize those, and we kept a lookout for them. That becomes impractical. And surveillance obviously had these people all memorized and kind of had their faces memorized. That becomes less practical if the list just grows to an unmanageable level.
Right. But I do want to clarify one thing, if I may. There's never been 71 on the list. That's a rolling number.
Right, it's the number.
Only 71 in the history, so it's always been in the 30s or.
Yeah. No, I know. We always celebrated when we could cross one off that we didn't have to look for anymore. No, but for me, I would have questions of the industry representative to see, how it helps them, or would it create too much of a burden for them?
Fasulo.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Todd Fasulo. For the record, I'm the Vice President of Corporate Security at the Wynn. I'm formerly retired Assistant Sheriff from Metro. I retired in 2018. I think listening to the conversation so far, I would offer this. If I get where the chair is going with the questions on going forward, do you just put every single sex trafficker into the black book? I would say probably not. But I think the focus should be mainly around the violence that's associated with it. That's number one. And the level of violence that is continually perpetrated by these individuals, not just the one and done, they get a probation, they get out of the game, or maybe they just do smaller crime. I would look at it more from the larger violent people that continually engage in the behavior. And then number two, they continually do it in a gaming facility, which is what I think fits the statute more so for putting somebody into the black book, because it gives law enforcement, it gives the hotel industry, the gaming industry, and it gives you another tool in that larger wheel, a spoke in that wheel, to enforce the industry standards, and the hotels have the ability to stay in compliance with gaming law and regulation. I've witnessed this firsthand in my career. I've witnessed it firsthand since I left Metro and went to the resort corridor. I'm still actively engaged with my peer group on the strip. We all suffer from some of the same issues that are perpetrated by these individuals that are, just downright violent. And if it wasn't for a casino, if it wasn't for a hotel, if it wasn't for tourism, they wouldn't have the grounds to go do it as fruitfully as they do now. That's why I think it's a good tool to put the most violent offenders in this black book. When I started at Metro in 91, the city wasn't where it's at right now. We've got Super Bowls coming. We have F1 coming. We're not the, million person population anymore. It's 2.5 plus. This is a big focus to the hotel industry right now, human trafficking. Every corporation has put forth brand new policy and procedures to combat it. And the Wynn is no difference. So I would just like to remind you of just the level of violence. And I know the chair in her past capacity is well aware of those issues that have come before her in the court. So I don't mean to sound, disrespectful in that manner, but I'm trying to emphasize that this should be strictly for the worst, the most violent criminal that preys upon a woman, and they become a victim through most of the time no fault of their own, and then they use the casino in order to facilitate that crime. And I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Well,
Thank you.
So it's one of those, my acknowledgement of the nature of the difficulty of prosecuting those offenses is because this is a coercion. It's as generic a felony as you can get, with a no-op probation. So meaning, sure. So when the case was negotiated from the very serious charges that were, when he was booked into the jail, a detective or an officer made their best determination based upon the recitation of facts from the alleged victim and any other witnesses they had of, okay, which crimes do I think those facts support and potentially the district attorney could charge? And they write them all out. And they can involve everything from restraining someone with the intent to commit a battery or a sexual assault, in which case it's a first-degree kidnapping, on down the line, right? They book them into the jail. Usually the district attorney reviews that, and because the vice detectives are very experienced, knowledgeable, oftentimes that list will match up exactly with what the district attorney charges, because the officers there tend to be long-standing officers who know what they're doing. So those will match up for the most part. Then that case goes through the system, and for a myriad of reasons that we've talked about, the case gets negotiated and reduced charges. And that will have a direct inverse relationship with the cooperation of witnesses, the availability of witnesses. The DAs just don't, negotiate cases for no reason, right? Especially when there are serious charges like first-degree kidnapping and the person's looking at, literally potential, depending on the nature of the case, life in prison. Sexual assault. These are, offenses that are, we wouldn't be having this conversation because he'd be in prison. So what happens is it got reduced to a coercion, which is a lesser category of felony. It is a non-sex offense felony. And the district attorney took no opposition to probation before the sentencing judge. That was their position at sentencing.
There's no opposition.
No opposition. Judge, we don't oppose you placing this offender on probation. And so from the judgment of conviction, that's what happened here, is he was placed on probation, ordered to stay out of the corridor 36 months. And I think because he hasn't had a trespass or a revocation, or else he would have told us. If he'd have been revoked from prison, I think we would know. Someone would know. So I don't know for sure, but I think someone would be able to tell us that. So that's what I'm referring to, is the case got.
I just understand no op.
That was a really long answer too. No opposition. Sorry. So anyway, I left off saying coercion, no probation, after he was brought to the attention. So that's what I'm struggling with worst of the worst, because the worst of the worst at the time he was forwarded as the worst of the worst had some DVs and now has a coercion, no probation. And I'm looking at just cases I handled that were with people that, were far as concerning. Let's put it that way.
We have one that at the time in 2013, I believe, I was the captain at Convention Center Area Command, and we had the rolling shootout between two pimps coming down the boulevard that had left the casino, left 3 people dead, including 2 innocent people. That person's he's on death row. He is one of the worst, but it was for one offense. And with all due respect, I'd like to offer this about what you just said about the no-op. You're correct. These cases, and I'm not going to speak for Metro because I'm not there anymore. I'll let Captain Haas speak about it. But from my perspective, they are very difficult to prosecute. They're very difficult for the police to bring forward because of uncooperating witnesses. But that doesn't change the fact that the person has a propensity to show violence. And by putting somebody into a black book, you send a very clear message that, yeah, you might have got a no-op probation, but you've continually used our casino industry to facilitate your violent crime. And we're not going to let that go anymore. You're lucky you're not in prison for whatever those technical or legal reasons are that they're not there. But to say that he's not the worst of the worst, I don't know, because I'm not there anymore at Metro. I would imagine, I have faith in the department that I come from, that they've brought forward who they really want to put on that in the book. But I think that because of the difficulty in prosecuting those cases doesn't negate the fact that you're talking about a very violent person that continually perpetrates those crimes in the casino industry. From being in the casino industry now, it is important to me to be able to enforce that if he's in the book. It keeps him off my property. It keeps, if he continues to engage in the sex trafficking, it keeps those girls off my property, which helps us stay in compliance all the way around to begin with. And it's the right thing to do, right? Human trafficking is at the forefront of a lot of conversation right now. This, like I said, is just one tool that will help us enforce that, whether you're on the gaming side or you're on the law enforcement side.
Well, that would be another interesting question. It was always a bad thing when a lawyer said, with all due respect. That was always like, oh, you knew something was coming. Right. It happens in politics all the time. I don't have a history of hearing these matters before. This is the very first one, which is why I ask a million questions, because I want to know going forward how this works. Has the board in the previous, and I guess the commission, because you referenced a specific person and a case, an item, do you consider convictions versus charges, or because, and what is the evidentiary standard? So, hearsay is admissible and we rely on that. I think we have in all other proceedings, but this is an interesting difference. And so I guess I would say, is that something that comes up in the previous hearings? Can someone address that maybe if you were at the previous hearings?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, it depends on the criteria we're looking at. For the conviction criteria, we're looking to present you evidence of convictions. But when it comes to reputational type of that criteria, it could include arrests. So it's whatever goes to their reputation. And certainly it isn't always convictions.
And I would say that historically, and Chief Taylor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but historically, a lot of the people that were initially put in the black book didn't have convictions because they couldn't get them convicted, was my understanding. Pulling from pretty far ago, but it was people that were involved with the mob at that time that, there was a lot of suspicion there, and maybe it's sometimes been arrests, but they just couldn't prove it. So therefore, we had to rely on the unsavory reputation.
I know since 1996 that everybody that we have nominated has had at least one felony conviction. For that, that might be true.
I do have one question about implementation and practicality. How will placing this person on the blacklist actually deter other violent, sex trafficking, violence against women, offenders who use gaming establishments to conduct criminal activity? How do you envision deterring them, if practically speaking?
I won't speak to how it practically will work. I'll leave that to the experts. But I can tell you, and you probably already know this, that the mere presence of someone on a non-restricted property who's on the list of excluded persons, they're guilty of a gross misdemeanor.
And that question goes back to my initial desire to hear from the industry representative in the Metro. That was, I'm sure I didn't phrase it properly, but from an industry perspective, how does it help you as opposed to simply trespassing this person?
So right now, if you are engaged in prostitution as a woman and you show up on property, it's a misdemeanor crime.
Right.
We know that those women are being trafficked by a pimp. The pimp is usually engaged in the felony behavior. The prostitute isn't engaged in the felony behavior until they commit a felony crime, such as a trick roll. If the pimp has a deterrent to not be in a casino because now he faces the gross misdemeanor for being in the black book, now the penalty becomes more stringent for him if he's caught on our property again. And it's widely published because it's public that who's in the black book. Whereas now you don't have, with the hotel industry, we don't always share information of who's on property, who's not on property with others. The black book, it gets shared with everybody. Everybody knows, so now there's a deterrent that's greater than what we currently have right now.
Right. Thank you. That's helpful. Just from a practical standpoint, I wasn't sure, that gave you a better tool than simply, trespassing him because he's a known pimp and has had these convictions.
Yeah, if we just trespass him, like if he walked on the property, I'm trespassing him the minute he walks on the property. But if he's in the black book, now I'm getting Metro involved because it's a gross misdemeanor.
Correct.
And I don't have to worry about trespassing him because he's going to go to jail.
Makes sense. With respect to the question of going forward, if he's one of several hundred people that probably should be in there, because I don't think any of us are going to disagree that, human trafficking is definitely something that is become a problem and that it's become a greater problem. It's not something we want to encourage and certainly not something we want to allow on our gaming properties. But assuming, this list would grow larger because more and more individuals of this type would get added, how does that affect you from a practical standpoint of enforcement? I mean,
so if I understand what you're asking me, the way that it would help the hotel industry going forward is we keep record of everybody that's on our property that we've ever trespassed. We keep pictures of everybody that we've trespassed. And a lot of the hotels are now going to facial recognition, and we can use that to combat the minute somebody steps onto our property. If you've been to my property and a few others, we have license plate recognition. If you're there and you commit a crime or we trespass you and you're there in a vehicle, we put your license plate in our recognition system. The minute you pull into my garage, I know you're there. So it gives us, if you're in the black book or you get trespassed, I'm putting you into our systems. And if you step foot on property, now I can get to you much quicker than letting you engage in more criminal behavior. And then I don't find out about it until you've already committed the crime.
Well, you've come a long way, so I'm sure that's easier than having people trying to look out for these people.
Yes.
So the quantity doesn't give you pause. My concern was that it would become unmanageable for you
No,
on
because
the property side.
I'm not gonna say that it won't. To be honest with you, I don't know that it won't. I think that you'll kind of plateau over time as the word gets out and we do a better job and law enforcement does a good job at enforcing and the hotel industry works together in unison with the police to help enforce this kind of stuff. I think it'll eventually plateau because the word will be out. And if the criminal justice system's on board, people end up with a good sentence because they've got the gross misdemeanor now instead of just a misdemeanor. Maybe we start to get more of a deterrence down the road. So it's hard to say. I mean, we have millions of people that come here every year. Yeah, sometimes it is overwhelming, but I look at it as this is the worst. This is the guy I definitely want to be on the lookout for because I don't want him in my property because somebody's going to be victimized.
Understood. Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. Again, I mean, I wouldn't want to support a policy that would create an impractical burden on the licensees to enforce, where failure to enforce and then subjects you to violations for not noticing that one of these individuals is on your property and allowing them to gamble or whatever it is that they may be there doing. So I just want to balance the two interests. So I appreciate your input.
You're welcome. I understand.
Thank you.
It's very helpful.
Question. There's nothing that mandates this commission, notwithstanding the compliance with 463-151-3A, to put someone in the black book. So we have to weigh a policy decision on whether this is appropriate. In exhibit number 10, judgment of conviction, plea of guilty on Weatherspoon. Number 2, stay out of the strip corridor. Do you have, I don't know if this is sensitive, but do you have Weatherspoon in your database for any reason?
Not for committing a crime on my property. No.
Just you would have it because he is now a convicted felon who received probation. Now, if he comes on your property, you're going to get security's going to get flagged, correct?
If he comes on the property and we know of his presence on our property,
Correct.
He'll be trespassed immediately.
Okay. And if you knew of the stay out of the strip corridor portion of his plea agreement, that could result in a revocation of probation. Don't we get to the same place? I'm trying to put you, the resort industry, in a position where, yes, we know there's deterrence, but not in a position. The worst thing that could happen for us is something happens with Weatherspoon. He's in the black book, and you don't detect it. He just walked into the bar, something happened, someone gets in a fight. You may not have been able to act in time. So I'm troubled by what is it we're trying to accomplish other than that this type of thing will get you in the black book, when there's other things available that may get us to the same place and not utilize historically, so give or take 31 people in the black book, which where you try and enforce, type of thing. If this thing jumps up to 100 over the next 5 years, does that mean an increase in the cost to the state on the enforcement side? Does that mean Metro's doing less and relying more on gaming enforcement? I don't know. I'm just not sure what the answer is. I know, I wish I could tell you that this is going to be the deterrent that is needed. I don't know. But I am concerned about issues that if you do this and it's not a deterrent, then where do we go?
I would suggest that. Well, there's multiple questions in there.
There's multiple.
Which one do you want me to answer first?
Anyone you want.
So going back to if he steps foot on property and he's under an order out from the court, which would be a violation of a court order, which could potentially put him into a predicament that he's violated the conditions of his probation. We may or may not know that. Normally, if someone is trespassed on the property and they come back and we recognize them and we catch them either through personal identification between security and they just see them, or two, they've used a form of identification for either gaming, rewards card, pay it at a point of sale, something like that, we would take them into custody because they've been formally trespassed. Then Metro would make a decision once we call them whether or not they're going to take them to jail after they determine if it's been a lawful arrest or not. They would determine that the person's under an order out. We may or may not know it at the time. If he's in the black book, I trust me, everybody on the strip is going to know that he's in the black book and he's not allowed to be in a casino. So it's not going to be a question at that point of, okay, do we trespass him or do we not take him into custody? Do we let him go this time? It's an immediate detention, and we're calling Metro because we have a more significant crime than just a mere trespass onto the property. I hope that answers the part of that question.
It's helpful.
Just so that the penalty is a 90-day difference, really,
True.
because with good time, which I know you know better than anyone on the planet,
When the jail's at 100% capacity.
when the jail's at 100% capacity, which is
It's
all the
70
time.
now.
It's at what?
70,
Okay.
roughly.
So if a judge were to sentence someone for violating trespass and the casino were to show up at a sentencing hearing and say he's the worst of the worst and he keeps coming back, the most they would get is 6 months with good, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's technically 6 months difference, but with good time, it's a matter of 3 to 6.
Does the court communicate with the casinos on the strip about a stay out of the strip corridor order as a probation condition?
They would call P&P.
But
We would normally get it from Metro Records. All the hotels have the ability to call into Metro Records. They'll tell us if someone's wanted or if there's a condition that requires a police presence. But yeah, ultimately P&P would be the ones that would deal with it if Metro took that person into custody to deal with the probation violation.
I wish there was a way for the court system to communicate directly with the casinos to present the list on, I don't know, a monthly or weekly basis to say this person has a stay out of the strip corridor probationary requirement, because I think that would short circuit that.
We're actually working on that right now
Okay, I think
with the courts and the DA to facilitate that.
because then we could trigger the probation violation.
What's the fiscal note on that?
We don't know yet, but we're almost there.
Well, that would be great.
Software communicating with software, is that what it is?
Yes, and we've already got the approval unofficially to get it done.
So you may have flipped me on this one because you're making it sound easy, right? Like, why don't we just put every pimp and every sex offender into the black book, and that way you're gonna get them out of casinos entirely, right? Because you'll, through your license plates and your facial recognition, you'll know that they're on property. They'll be rang up on a gross misdemeanor and gone. I mean, can you handle 1,000 people in the black book? 2,000 people in the black book?
If the technology is on the property in order to facilitate that, then you probably could. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you that that's an easy task, because it's not. And I'm not advocating by any stretch that every single person that engages in this behavior get put into the black book. I only advocate for the ones that continually show a history of violence and they perpetrate their crimes through the casino industry.
I'm going to use the with all due respect, because I think that even if you don't punch somebody in the head, pimping them out is inherently violent.
It is.
I have a couple of different questions, but there was I think the chief made the reference to the item on, it was in attachment G, I think it was 2013, when he was accused of stealing $1,000 in chips. Did we not prosecute that? I mean, that's a gaming related felony right there, right? I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, there was not a conviction as a result of that. I'm not sure if gaming was involved in that particular case.
Okay. are there license implications for licensee if they don't act on someone in their property on Black?
There is, if they know that the individual is on property and they fail to remove them, they could be subject to disciplinary action with the board.
Has that happened?
Not that I'm aware of.
In the old days. James Taylor, for the record, I think there was an incident up at Lake Tahoe with Sam Giancana and he was responsible for the Chicago crime family and Frank Sinatra, but certainly nothing in the recent days.
All right, thank you.
Has everybody had enough? Have you had a chance to, have you had anything else?
Here from Metro.
I'm sorry. What did you say, Agnes? You said you offered to have Metro come up and address the commission.
As I indicated, they're here if you would like to hear from them.
Sure.
That's Captain Haas.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi.
My name is Captain Fred Haas. I am in charge of the gang and vice section at Metro. We've seen a lot of this violence with human trafficking, and it has exploded over the past couple of years, as you've indicated. This isn't a new issue, but it is an emerging and growing issue across our valley. What's increased also is the amount of violence. The amount of violence that these people use to get these females to work in that environment over and over again. And if they don't produce a certain amount of money or do a certain amount of thefts on these casinos, they're beaten. Sometimes beyond recognition. I have these photos that it pulls at your heartstrings when you see them. That violence goes beyond that relationship between the pimp and the victim of human trafficking. It also goes into those that are in the hotel rooms that pick these girls up because they've trained them how to drug the people that are coming to our hotels and steal their valuables from the hotel room. In 2021, that loss was about 2.3 million. This year so far, we're at $6.7 million loss on top of that. And 3 of those individuals lost their lives. So there's a cost of this beyond that. I also worry about these young women that are out there because they're not bringing them in from out of state. They're preying on our girls. They're preying on people like my daughter and our kids that are here in this community. And they're putting them out there to be abused. They're putting them out there to get trafficked because men think it's one legal here or that they're not going to get caught. I've seen, I have a 15-year-old young lady. She has been stopped 17 times by us from the same pimp. She is HIV positive. In the last 30 days, she had 5 of her teeth knocked out from him. I have not been able to prosecute because she fails to be a cooperative victim on the backside of this case. This is what we're trying to address with this. I am not trying to go after the 300 or 400 a year that are doing this. What I'm trying to go after is those that are very sophisticated in how they do this, that the coercion is beyond violence. It is beyond what we see in the one-offs or two-offs where they come out, think they're going to be a pimp in Vegas. We arrest them. They get their probation. They go back home, or they realize that we're not going to accept that behavior in our jurisdiction. I'm after the ones that are continual, year after year, and we get these victims over and over. And what I'm finding is new victims coming forward. It's not the same female victim coming forward day after day. That I'm getting 7 or 8 different females that are coming forward because of the violence. But they're more afraid of the violence than they are putting them in jail and getting help. And that's a hard pill for me to swallow, sitting in this vice unit and watching these girls get brutalized on a daily basis. We have to try something new to get these people out of our community and let them know that we're not going to accept that type of violent behavior here. And is there a lot of them? Yeah. Yeah, we have 300 and some cases this year already, but out of those, I can only think of 6 or 7 that I have concerns because of prosecution, because it happens over and over and over again. Most of these, they take the conviction, they go back home, or we don't see them again on the strip or in that type of activity because we do spot check them on the backside of that. I do have cases that are in the court system that if they don't go well in the court system, that I could say, yes, that might increase that number slightly to increase what we would ask for from this board. But I have to find a way to protect these young women because it hurts. It hurts to see that every day. For my detectives, Catherine Huey's here. She's one of the senior vice detectives. She's been with us almost 10 years. I can't imagine how many victims she's seen and had to deal with day after day, over and over again from this violence.
Sir, so on your list, you have identified 6 chronic repeat offenders whose tentacles of violence just continue to grow. It's about 6.
I would say about 6 is what I can come off the top of my head, thinking the 12 months I've been in this position. I would say if this could be a potential for us to go down this road, if I am not able to get through the court systems.
And if we extrapolate with those 6 chronic offenders, how many victims are impacted by them?
Anywhere from 2 to 20. I've had some pimps that have had 20 girls that we've come forward and not been able to get one of them to come forward as a victim.
And so the reach of this potential decision could be could have serious ramifications in terms of helping keep gaming safe. in the state of
Absolutely.
Nevada.
Keeping our casino safe, the gaming safe, our visitors safe, and our girls, most importantly.
I'm sure.
Go ahead.
So within that vein, right, do you think you could feasibly work with our staff to write a policy over how we would categorize somebody to fit into this people?
And I'd be more than happy to be a part of that solution, sir.
What would something like that look like? Would it be
I
based
think-
on number of arrests, number of?
I think the arrest is even hard because I may not get that arrest because I don't have a good victim, but I can look at reports. I can look at amount of time and is it over a certain period of years? You know, I'm not looking for the one guy I have one case and I never hear from him again. I'm looking at the guy have 6, 7, 10, 15 cases on. But I'm sure we can find a policy in there and I'll work with the Gaming Commission to do that, to find that middle ground on what's acceptable. None of this violence is acceptable to me, and I have to find a way to combat that.
I appreciate that. I think for the person in front of us, I'd rather have one of your guys follow him until he's on the strip and then bust him on his parole violation and send him to prison, right? Because that would be a better outcome for society right now.
So
But
the issue with the probation, that's good for a year.
Yeah.
What happens when he's off probation? He's still doing this. Mr. Weatherspoon had a victim come forward 2 months ago, but she failed to be a victim. He is still out there victimizing people on these casino floors.
and you don't have to convince him of his character and where he works. You know, I think that if we go down this road, it could be slippery if we don't put some parameters around it. And I think the goals are clearly noble. I worry about not knowing where we're going yet. Leave it at that.
I'm very interested in putting on the list somebody that's this egregious. And I am concerned about the precedent that we're setting and opening the floodgates. But when you specifically identify 6 chronic offenders, it alleviates some of my concerns about the precedent we're setting and what's coming in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The thing I would be concerned about, and you know, it's not really this. I think hopefully from the tenor of my questions from the beginning, it's not this person, right? It's for me, it's process and consistency and practicality, and because it's easy to say this guy's a bad guy, put him on a list. I would have been done like an hour ago. Okay, that's not the issue. The real issue is, you know, I hope when you're looking at these cases and you're bringing them to us, hopefully you're being very mindful of the casino relationship, because I know that, you know, here there's an Uber driving away, you know, there's a domestic violence at home, but he's a pimp, right? And so there's a lot of like tangential, some of it's casino and some of it's not. And quite frankly, when this came to, from what I'm hearing in 2018, this whole coercion thing didn't even exist. So what it really was you all knew what you knew about broken ribs, violence, and all that stuff. But if we were to have this hearing in 2018, there wasn't a whole lot of linking up to anything to do with the casino. It was some trespasses, which, you know, look, their job is not easy. It's a, you know, we call the cops, they get removed, they're there the next day, they're there 12 hours later, they're there 6 hours later. I mean, I'm sure there's a record 4 hours later, I'm being told by Mr. Fasulo. it's a challenge. And, and you got the mentally ill, you've got all kinds of problems, and we appreciate that, and I appreciate it. And my issue is, though, how long you been with Metro?
21 years, man.
Okay, so I'm just a hair older, just a little bit. Just skosh older than you, as far as in the system. And I know for a fact that sometimes there's more than one way to skin a cat when you can't get a charges stick. And I get that, and I understand, and but I guess I would be super mindful to suggest to our people and to you that if this isn't a thing where we can have 400 people on the list, and you're telling me, well, nobody wants that. But I guarantee you, out of those 400 cases filed between January of 19 and December of 21, there's some bad actors on there, maybe worse than this, that are bringing 15-year-olds. The case that you just talked about, my guess is that person's maybe a little worse, right? And so there needs to be that casino nexus, and we can't just be like a tool to make things happen that aren't happening otherwise in the justice system, which, while very frustrating, is the best in the world. Not perfect, though. I just had a general question that has nothing to do with this. And this is either for you or Mr. Fasulo or both. Any efforts to put some teeth into trespass as it relates to strip casinos? I mean, why? It's always been this. Nothing has changed since 1994 when I was a DA. Nothing has changed. It's a rotating door, and I was just curious.
So about a month and a half ago, I brought my peer group together along with some other people in the criminal justice world to hammer out that exact problem, because it is a cyclical, it's just a revolving door, and there's no teeth behind the trespass statute. And the way that the statute is written, there's no timeline for a trespass, but the courts have ruled that Metro can't enforce anything outside of a 12-month period. That needs to change. We recognize that. And then we need to get judges, the DA, PD, we need to get everybody on board on a reform of how we address trespass and the chronic issues that come with the people and it's just not the strip, it's all over the county, it's all over the state. But yes, to answer your question, there is some things in the works, and it's moving along very quickly and very well.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a question drawn from my lack of knowledge about certain things. Are there any criminal enhancements associated with the strip corridor or licensed properties as they currently exist? Can you get an enhancement for committing a crime specifically on a certain type of property, aka a licensed property that you're aware of?
No, there's no enhancement for where a crime occurs at, whether it's at a casino property in a residence or street.
And Mr. Fasulo, I think you'd indicated as a corporate entity have certain policies and procedures in place to try to address sex trafficking and prostitution on property. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like? Is that employee training? Is that like sort of safe harbor provisions where if someone approaches an employee and says, I'm being trafficked, that they're safely protected? Talk a little bit about that and what that looks like.
Great question. So yes, to all of the things you just said, there is a very robust policy that we pushed out at my property. It's actually corporate wide in North America. We roll it out here and we roll it out in Boston at our property there. Every employee goes through that training. It's in addition to just reading the policy. There's videos, there's indicators, how to identify indicators of human trafficking, what to do when you see those indicators. And then there's specific training just for security personnel on how to deal with that when the bartender calls us and says, hey, I think this woman sitting at my bar is being trafficked or is engaged in prostitution. Now security knows what to do with it. We also have specific signage in various parts of the hotel, especially in the holding rooms, that provide advocates and numbers for people to call to get the help. We will facilitate those phone calls as well as part of our policy. If we can convince the young lady to get out of the game, per se. So yeah, it's a very robust policy, and they spend a lot of time putting it together all the way up to the CEO level that put a message out in a video about the importance behind this issue.
I appreciate that. It doesn't surprise me that your company is taking that position and a leading role in that. I think that if we're looking at as a commission, what we can do within our authority to really tackle an issue that is a problem within the properties that we regulate, but is also a broader societal. Maybe some regulation around this space would be appropriate, as well as seeing if we could get something in terms of a enhancement. And there might be differences of opinion on that subject, but look, if it's our job to protect the industry as much as possible, then finding ways to really tackle this outside of a deterrence from people who don't seem to have much problem committing really serious felonies to start with. It would be something I would certainly be interested in.
The record that's before us, I'm sorry.
I apologize, but Nicole says the court reporter was asking for a break a while ago. I'm sorry. Can you stick with us just like another 7 minutes? Okay, thanks.
Is it not? Is 5 minutes enough?
Yeah, I just had 7. Is this on? Okay, great. Thank you very much for sticking around. I know you had some questions. I apologize, we needed the quick break.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Let me tell you where my headset is on this, and I can't speak for anybody else, on the commission. This is a horrible, horrible record. It's a horrible blight for the state of Nevada, and something has to be done. You've come to this commission, you went to the board, and now it's come to us. What I would propose now, this is not a motion. This is just where my head is. There's a couple things. The facts that have been presented to this commission make Weatherspoon a candidate. No ifs about it. He's a candidate under 463, 151, 3A. Number two, Weatherspoon was served, as stated, by Deputy Attorney General Solms. He's been served. The attorney was served with documents. So he's had every opportunity to come in and contest if he so desired. Number three, there's been a lot of incredible conversation, and statements by the commission members about something more needs to be done beside whatever we do. We need help from the court system. We need help from Metro. We need help from the hotels. It can't be the burden of the state of Nevada enforcement to bring these people to us. So what I'm thinking, again, out loud is he is a candidate. He didn't file a response. He should be inserted in the black book, and hopefully it's a deterrent. But again, it has to be a case-by-case basis. We are not looking for, at least this is me, we're not looking for the floodgates to open for 300 people to be brought before us, because that just shows, as far as I'm concerned, the ineffective nature of what was done. So that's what I would propose. I won't make it a condition if it goes that far, but Commissioner Keffer regarding Metro and the county and beefing up the laws, that's got to happen right away. These agencies need to talk to each other. They need to talk to each other. And I don't know whether there's any support for what I just said, but something's got to be done, because this is a horrible, horrible record, and it hurts. It hurts me to read about it. It hurts me to hear about it, let alone the people that were brought in, with Metro and and through Wynn, about how they see it every day. So anyway,
Are there any other comments, questions, anything at all? There being none. All right. At this time, does someone wish to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion, Madam Chair, if I may. I move to place Mr. Weatherspoon on the list of excluded persons based upon the criteria enunciated under NRS 463-151, subsection 2, subsection 3A, and subsection C, because I believe we have sufficient evidence before us to make the determination in considering all the facts before the record, including exhibits 1 through 16 and the prevalent violence against women demonstrated by Mr. Weatherspoon in gaming establishments, tangentially related to activities around gaming establishments, his reputation, his drug charges, his weapon charges, his felony related charges, sex trafficking, and using the Las Vegas casinos as a backdrop for his activity. And I think based on his prior convictions under subsection 3A of the statute, it falls squarely within the ambit of a prior conviction of a crime, which is a felony in the state under the laws of the United States, a crime involving moral turpitude or violation of the gaming laws of any state, and includes the issues that he had with shifting chips on the casino table, separate and apart from the violence against women, specifically in a casino, various casinos in the state of Nevada. Also, I believe his conduct falls squarely within the scope of subsection 3C of the statute, and he has a notorious or unsavory reputation, which adversely has affected the public confidence and trust that the gaming industry is free from criminal or corruptive elements. And I think that is the scope of my motion, unless somebody has any questions or comments, if I need to make any modifications.
Any modifications? Here's the thing. I'm comfortable with a motion to pursuant to certain. I'm comfortable with a motion pursuant to the NRS that you are the statute cited. The problem is all the other things. I'm a little concerned that there were some things that were charged, some things that were not charged, some things are convictions, some things are not convictions. So if I'm going to vote on that, I would like there was a lot of elaboration of commentary, and I'm not comfortable voting on that as a motion, if that's okay. So either if you want me to take a vote, I will on that particular motion. If you want to amend it to just streamline it to not include a lot of discussion of the nature of the charges, because some are in the police report, some are charged, some are not charged, some are convictions. I'm less comfortable.
Okay, and I do apologize. I thought I was supposed to identify the criteria that were used in making the determination and create a record. And to the extent.
Well, then I'd have to get a transcript of the list of charges that you had. I mean, is there a?
So I identified and incorporated by reference exhibits 1 through 16.
Okay.
Noting that 16 was confidential. Attorney General Brian Egg, is it necessary for me to simply just identify the statute, or should I add specific reasons, as I understood that I had to identify using the criteria?
I think your reasons are noted on the record. For purposes of the motion, you can just identify the specific statutes that you are making your determination on.
Okay, thank you. So I will modify it accordingly. I move to place Mr. Weatherspoon on the list of excluded persons based upon the criteria enunciated under NRS 463-151, subsection 2, subsection 3A, and subsection 3C.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Just
I misunderstood the instructions.
No, I just can't remember all the charges and everything, and so I'm more comfortable with that language for me personally. So thank you for that. So there's a motion pending. Any comments, questions before I call for a vote?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll support the motion, but I do think we may have an opportunity to consider what more we can do to try to combat sex trafficking in our state through the powers that we have as regulatory body over casino gaming. And I'll think about it and If you have any ideas, let me know.
Okay.
And the reason I made the motion is because I believe Nevada is no place for violence against women, especially when you juxtapose that with the utilization of gaming establishments in furtherance of these criminal activities. And I think we have an obligation to do what we can to protect women against violence and minors from sex trafficking. And I think this is a prime candidate for exclusion. And I've listened to the presentation today. It's been very helpful from everyone. I know there's been a great deal of work that's gone into this. This is unusual, but I think we have to be apprised of what's happening in our state and respond accordingly and send a message. Thank you for your time.
Do you have any comments?
I don't have anything more to add. Again, I mean, anything that we can do to support the industry and Metro in keeping these bad actors out of casinos, I think is worthwhile and something that I would fully support.
Okay, so before, I would just reiterate my position, which is I don't disagree with anything anybody said up here today as far as concerns. I certainly respect Metro and the job they have to do, the licensees and their incredibly difficult job in dealing with the trespass laws that are so frustrating. My only I'm going to vote to support this, but my only caution would be I would hate to see this used as a mechanism to circumvent an inability to prosecute for a prostitution. That's not what this is supposed to be. It's not, let's go to the place with the lesser standard where they take a lot of hearsay. Right? And with that said, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, and I'll have an order for you to sign, Madam Chair.
Thanks.